welcome to my channel, The Movie Nerd Diaries. On this channel we will talk about movies, shows, characters, real life situations such as murder mysteries, crime thrillers, anything that interests me. If my voice sounds... If you don't like the sound of my voice, I do apologise. If you don't like the way I talk, I do apologise. But this is my accent. This is my voice. I can't change it. I also sound very nervous on this recording because this is my first video. Believe it or not, this is like this probably like the 20th recording that I had to retake constantly. And obviously if the editing on this video is not as good, then I also apologize for that, as this is my first video and I can only hope that I would get better on with time. Today we are going to talk about Homelander from The Boys. Now The Boys is one of my favorite shows, and Homelander is one of the most sinister characters that I've ever seen, and I would really love to talk about him and how it could be like a scarier, darker version of Marvel. I hope I don't get copyrighted for that though. If you don't know what The Boys is a show that was it's a show based on a comic book series. If you've never seen The Boys, then you're either living under a rock, or you're just not interested in superhero comic books or shows, and that's fine. So, Homelander is the leader of the Seven, a powerful group of superheroes owned and managed by the company Vought International. At first glance, the Seven look commanding and virtuous, front and center of the public-facing mission to defend America against all threats. In the world of The Boys, the superhero industry dominates everything, from politics to consumerism to entertainment. At the peak of the Seven's popularity, the most recognized and celebrated member of the team is Homelander. With chiseled features, a glowing smile, and a patriotic superhero suit, including a US flag for the cape, the blue-eyed, blonde-haired hero is held by many to be the perfect symbol of duty, excellence, and traditional values. He has the best powers to boot. Much like a certain Kryptonian hero, Homelander has heat rays, super strength, durability, flight, and X-ray vision. Impervious to all known threats, Homelander can withstand extreme temperatures and sustain disastrous attacks. No weapon has been identified that can injure him, at least physically. Homelander is dripping with charm and assuredness, dosing all with his confident smile and hopeful promises, but hidden from the public eye, a truer form emerges. Homelander personifies the self-centeredness and materialism of the modern world, glorifying competitiveness, rugged individualism, dominance. He deeply embraces and over-aligns with his superior persona, embodying the virtues of an all-American defender with fervor. Sorry, I'm very nervous on this recording. He is consumed by his image and often isn't sure where his real self ends and his performance begins. He feels like he is socially bold and entitled. Homelander is often the first to step in front of the camera or to deliver sappy statements about his unyielding commitment to justice. He savours his elite status, seeing himself through the eyes of the people who hang on his birds. He is a god among men, so he claims to be. And it's clear that Homelander derives pleasure not from genuine emotional connections with his followers, but from the power dynamic. He will do anything, including executing innocent people who may tarnish his image to keep the reputation that he is a good guy. Homelander not only indulges in mass adoration, his entire ego relies on hero worship, the constant search for admiration and praise. The overt displaying of himself and the hungry need for the spotlight function to distract him from the truth within. Like Superman refueling his powers from the rays of the sun, Homelander must bathe in adulation to restore his fragile ego. Like the spinning of bad news, Homelander has learned to twist the superficial into the reality. His fragility, though hidden by layers of confidence and zeal, is triggered by the absence of attention. The moment he notices the hollowness with him, he's assailed by terrible feelings of self-disgust and inadequacy. Somewhere beneath the layers of muscle under the glorious sham is the most vulnerable of hearts. One of the founding scientists at Vought, Dr. Jonah Vogelbaum, oversaw the creation and training and indoctrination of Homelander, who he called John, as a test subject. Okay, Sorry about that. As a test subject injected with the chemical agent Compound V, Homelander was primarily raised in an experimental lab room and under constant observation. Even as a baby, sorry, I'm sorry, why did I sound like that? Even as a baby, Homelander was deprived of the comforts of physical affection, stimulating toys and enriching environments that would normally have fostered his psychosocial development. Vogelbaum was somewhat of a father figure to Homelander, offering smiles and affirming gestures through a small window of a lab room, but never offering him unconditional love in the form of genuine acceptance, warm and caressing contact, and one-on-one time that isn't based in evaluation. In truth, Homelander's lethal and uncontrolled powers kept the researchers detached and distant. Unintentionally, these protocols had some anti-socializing effects on Homelander. Throughout his youth, Homelander spent most of his critical waking hours performing tasks, taking endurance tests, and being stretched to his limits by zealous experimenters. A type of attachment formed with his creators, he did receive attention by his surrogate caregivers, but only through the narrow and relentless expectation to perform. A contingent, sorry, the pressure created a transactional relational schema for Homelander. When he masters his powers, he receives affirming words and time with his caregivers. Fail, and he undergoes more torturous tests and criticism. Homelander later admits that he often felt alone and scared as he learned to navigate his inhuman abilities, comparing it to drowning. This little suit wasn't cold and feelingless from birth. He was often overwhelmed with emotions, battling fear, insecurity and hopelessness, but was never taught how to regulate them. I had to figure it out all by myself, he claims. Vought scientists should have known that extreme isolation, lack of physical contact, and scarcity of social interaction would have deleterious effects on Homelander's emotional development. Well-established science shows that babies can miss out on critical learning stages of development due to absent caregivers. Early life deprivation can have a long-lasting, irreparable effects on young brains. Even lab studies on mice show that being raised in impoverished environments have deficits in intelligence, curiosity, and personalities. Sure, mice need an abundance of toys, tunnels, and hideouts in their environments. Humans need a more complex version of activity, stimulation, and exploration. Brains in richer, more stimulating environments have a higher states of synaptogenesis, neuron growth, leading to increased brain activity and a flourishing mind. Like a mouse in an impoverished cage, Homelander's emotional, social, and intellectual potentials were stunted. Homelander missed out on the normal everyday stuff of childhood. Youth often learn about core values, worldview, and beliefs from their parents. In a way, Homelander was in charge of his own upbringing, learning through self-discovery. He was taught him that he was a weapon. Well, he taught himself that he was a weapon, a tool. He was not designed for love, nurturing, or companionship. Homelander was often praised for destructive, not compassionate acts. Homelander learned to value antisocial features of his budding personality. Kill faster, obliterate bigger, think later, feel nothing. This will come back to haunt him. Ethical science is about consent, but none of this was approved or wanted by him. It wasn't humane. The resulting beliefs Homelander adopted would later extend to his treatment of others. Despite the wide belief that narcissists and psychopaths do not feel emotions, most who have extreme versions of these conditions are not completely cold and unfeeling. In fact, Homelander is driven to be loved and cared for, and while his efforts often result in the violation or abuse of others, he lives with the consequences. Homelander is also periodically aware of his repelling features, that those who really know him, like Maeve, are fundamentally disgusted by him. In his quiet solitude, he is saddened and shameful of the person he has become. Homelander is reminded of his difficult origins during a publicity stunt that involves him visiting his childhood home. In front of the cameras, he gives the intimate stories he's been coached to narrate down to the details of his parents, his bedroom, and his birthdays. He's forced to talk about a family he's never met, toys he's never played with, books he's never read. When he encounters the blue blanket that was his only source of comfort as a child in the lab, Homelander is crushed by sadness. He reaches out to his handlers, infuriated by the intrusive traumatic memories associated with the blanket, but they're more interested in the photo op. He returns to the script as directed, but when he described his counterfeit childhood, he actually is able to conjure the details of his own fantasy, momentarily savoring the false memories of a safe, joyful, and loving childhood he never had. When Homelander visits Dr. Vogelbaum in private, the doctor confesses that Becca Butcher, the woman Homelander assaulted, had become pregnant with his baby. Vogelbaum paints a horrible picture of Becca being killed by the baby during childbirth and the baby dying shortly after. Though Vogelbaum remains cold and distant with Homelander, he offers his version of an apology. He compares Homelander's upbringing to cross-breeding dogs, explaining that atrocities occur in experiments all the time. You should have been raised with a family, Vogelbaum laments. But when Homelander asserts he's the most powerful superhero among them all, Vogelbaum reacts with disdain and disappointment. The interaction with Homelander was yet another experience of rejection and dismissal. Because Vogelbaum is like a father to him, it has lasting effects. Homelander is constantly defending against feeling unsatisfied, rejected, unworthy, and wary of the world. Though he has an outward appearance of confidence, independence, and perfection, his self-talk is doubting. He tries to unhook by pushing emotions to the side and shoving away unwanted feelings. But this bottling technique of coping is only temporarily effective, and after the confirming and biting words of his father, Homelander is unable to deny his shame and sadness that he is a mistake. Like many narcissists, Homelander can be charming and make favorable first impressions. These attributes can attract partners and friends initially, but their superficiality and self-absorption lead to troubled relationships. Madeline Stillwell, the director of hero management at Vought, is one of the first to recognize that under Homelander's sturdy exterior is an impressionable interior. Seizing the opportunity, she begins grooming him to advance Vaught's agenda. She sees him as a tool she can crank for the betterment of the company. In his early days at Vought, Homelander struggled to sustain the feeling of importance. When other soups like Black Noir were celebrated, Homelander was flooded with feelings of neglect and invisibility. All or nothing. Stillwell reminds him that getting on stage is the future she is building for Homelander, but she expresses disappointment when he shows weakness or hesitation. You need to take it, she commands. Stillwell combines this ego fluffing with affection, touching and caressing him. Homelander's curiosity for Stillwell leads him to use his X-ray vision to spy on her, catching tender moments between her and her baby, observing their cherished bonds. The cuddling, the cooing, the breastfeeding. Homelander is filled with a complicated, Freudian-level envy. He is struck by the natural and raw union, which builds more yearnings with him for one-on-one time with Stillwell. But the constant cycle of affection, giving control, and dehumanizing reaches a boiling point. Homelander is gutted to learn that Becca and his child are alive, and that Stillwell participated in keeping him away from them. When Stillwell and her baby are captured and held hostage by Billy Butcher, Homelander uses his heat vision to burn her to death. Her baby is discovered safe and sound several miles away. Once Homelander discovers that his son Ryan is alive and living with Becca Butcher at a Vought compound, he's eager to meet them. To Becca's horror, Homelander unexpectedly visits, landing in their yard and pulling Ryan out of his routine whenever he pleases. At 8 years old, Ryan is a timid and quiet boy. Homelander is frustrated with Becca raising the son as a non-soup. Seeing Ryan as a sheltered and soft-mannered kid, he imposes on their family dinners, homework time and playtime, insisting that he's present as a role model for Ryan and hoping that having a man in the house will toughen Ryan up. Homelander can't help but intimidate and mentally stranglehold Becca as part of this dynamic. He drops in whenever he wants, knowing it terrifies her, but Homelander also sees the red flags in Ryan's lifestyle. This facade of a home hidden away by Vought. Ryan in a different type of experiment. He is isolated from the outside world. Pulling from the trivia and concepts he learned from his early training, God, football, and the USA, Homelander begins to co-parent with Becca, but much of it is just a pantomime. His efforts for a trusting father-son bond appear to serve as a self-fulfillment to repair the wounds left by his own harsh upbringing. Homelander completely misses the mark when he pushes Ryan off the roof of the house, convinced that Ryan would respond successfully to the toughness of these teachings. But Ryan falls to the dirt with a thud, to the horror of his mother. Ryan does seem to be unscathed. He is half soup, but the experience shook him to the core. The fear of his father sets in. Meanwhile, Homelander continues to try and build the relationship he never had. He sees an opportunity for a love without contingencies. He sees the possibility of Ryan having what he missed out on, and the idea that he can fulfill those needs reignites something within Homelander. But to be honest, I don't think Homelander likes the idea of really being a father or being a mother. He just wants something that he didn't have. I don't think he understands the concept or the grasp of family. The failing of all his relationships lead Homelander to return to the love he can count on, his fans. He wears a vacant gaze and a saccharine smile like one wears a suit. The resonation of applause and cheers fill his empty soul, pumping false confidence back into his compound V-laced bloodstream. Ethical science is about consent, but none of Homelander's treatments and trials were approved or wanted by him. It wasn't humane. Those tortures taught him that he doesn't belong to himself, that despite the most powerful abilities at the tip of his fingers, he is owned by Vought. Homelander lives in a nightmare no one else can understand, creating for himself the replication of the trials in the lab, repeatedly reliving the vacancy of the tiny room and the loneliness of the blue blanket.